How do you seek to make change as mayor 2020? What is it like being a woman in politics? Are you ever fearful for your life?
First of all, I couldn't believe that they arrested me at that protest.
How would you change that?
Ooh, the gentrification?
I want you to look into this camera, and I want you to tell the people why they should vote for you to be mayor of 2020. On three. 1, 2, 3. Marcus Show?
The Marcus Ward Show.
Marcus Ward.
He's mad funny.
He's a funny guy.
Wow, Marcus Ward.
Like him, like his personality.
He's a really nice guy, but gosh, he asks some pointy questions.
I respect him. I respect what he does, what he's doing.
This Marcus Ward show is... He's bringing light to a lot of very special issues and marginalized people. I felt very comfortable with him. I gotta say that. The guy is really great. He's adorable.
Me llamo Alberto. Yo soy de El Salvador y tú estás mirando el Marcus Ward Show.
Miss Raiford, I want to start off by asking you, what made you decide to even go into politics?
Back in September of 2010, my nephew, who had just graduated from high school, was killed by someone in Portland. It was gun violence that erupted, and he was the only one shot out of about 200 people that were outside. They said there were about 67 shots. And so just realizing, like, wow, my nephew literally went to go to a concert to listen to music, and he was killed. As far as Portland is concerned, if they've identified you as a gang member, there's not a lot of investigation that goes in. And so the assumption is that it's a black person. But we also live in a place that's very well known for white supremacy. And white supremacists also shoot at brown people, and they also run them down with their cars and all kinds of things. But the fact that they had identified it as gang-related, which meant that they didn't have to investigate it, was a concern for me. 10 years later, we still haven't found out who killed my nephew. That made me feel very political because I needed answers.
Do you think, had your nephew not been killed, you wouldn't be so politically inclined or even want to get into politics?
Right. I mean, I never thought about it. I never considered it. I never wanted to be politically engaged in the manner that I am now. Once I came to Portland and I saw that everything was involving the politics. And I mean, everything from the faith-based, the churches came along, the school districts came along. You have the transportation systems, you have the health department. You have all these different agencies that have a prime benefit to relate with the community on these issues of gun violence. I wanted to build funding and priorities and policies that actually saved our lives or were proactive in preventing violence. And what I saw on the table was only a response to the murders.
Do you consider yourself an activist who happens to be a politician, or a politician who's an activist?
I believe that I was a politician first, because when I saw the measure of community involvement in gun violence, politics was the only way that I could see making change happen. Probably after the death of Trayvon Martin, when community asked me to get involved with local issues around gun violence and really predatory profiling, like what George Zimmerman did in Florida to Trayvon Martin, when community reached out to me because of the petitioning and the advocacy that I was doing with my nephew and asked me to come and represent some rally or build a movement to support Trayvon, that's when activism became the hat that I could wear.
You're not safe in America! That's right. You're not safe! You're not safe!
When I told my public that I was going to be interviewing a candidate who's running for mayor 2020, they had a series of questions. Everyone, ask her this, ask her that.
What's it like being a woman in politics?
Misogyny, misogynoir.
Do you think it's more so because you're a woman, or do you think it's because you're black?
Black. I mean, we have a place in America for white women, and it's right directly alongside of cis white men. And we know in America, and if we look at our history, black women are sustaining the foundation for all of those people. Our great-great-grandparents nursed the parents and the people that are in Congress right now voting against our interests as human beings, you know, because racism is a focus of systemic authority and privilege, and it has nothing to do with a moral or ethical value of the people. We are still fighting to be heard, even though we are the ones that are depended upon to be the understanders or mammies, you know.
So what issues are you most passionate about?
Oh, community health and safety, jobs, housing, our infrastructure. And I live in downtown Portland. There's bridge cranes everywhere, but I'm also walking every morning and I'm looking at all these buildings that have the unreinforced masonry signs saying that they need to be demolished. And I'm kind of like, wow, this is a contradiction, because if we're building basements and we're uplifting and upheaving buildings that have been there for over 100 years, at the same time that we're, you know, having this issue with housing, and we're not looking at restoration or rehabilitation, I think we're contributing to the unstable infrastructure, and that's going to create more problems for us later on. And so right now my thought is that we need to build and sustain housing for people that are not housed, and we need to do that through rehabilitation and restoration of some of the properties that we currently have in our city that aren't being mended.
You live downtown Portland, so do you live in a poverty-stricken community, or do you live middle class, wealthy?
It's pretty much a mixed community, because on one side you have condominiums and houses, but then right on Burnside you have a lot of buildings that are old. You could have $1 million apartment and have right across the street people living outside on the side. With the housing being so dysfunctional for people, it's pretty much a health issue, you know.
Gentrification.
James Baldwin called it Negro removal. Systemically, politically, economically, it is to remove brown people from community.
How would you change that?
Ooh, the gentrification? I mean, first of all, slowing down the current development that's happening in the city. We talked about how it's making it hard for our infrastructure to be stabilized, but I think also that it's promoting the cost of rent, and it's pushing people out to the margins. Gentrification partnered with mass incarceration. Gentrification partnered with overrepresentation in foster care for black people. And I think that one of the first things is like identifying properties that are owned in the city and bringing vulnerable communities to housing, and making sure that when they come into the communities that have the housing as a provision, that we're not continuing the cycle of criminalizing them because of their economic status or because of their color.
How are you different from the other candidates?
Because I don't see that a lot of the male leadership I see in activism is as focused on solutions as they are focused on how they feel about certain situations. And then you have the ego play of what they know and wanting people to understand and share in their process of how they know things and how they want to do things. I've never been intimidated by that, because to me it's like it's very immature and it doesn't get us anywhere any faster. And so being able to just kind of maintain my focus, I blame that on being a woman and being able to focus and being able to complete things.
What are we going to do to get those racist cops out of power, out of Portland, Oregon, out of the office that they bear?
Being the police commissioner, I don't believe that most racists would want to work for a black woman, and especially someone that knows their business and is interested in indicting officers that belong to fraternal organizations that are connected to racism.
Stars and stripes in America, that's slashes. Slashes, those are slashes. They slashes. They slashes on the back of black people. Slashes, they stripes, those are scars. Those are scars. Scars, that's from being beat. That's being beat.
Knowing the history of our policing force and all the many times that they've had issues around race as an indicator to their violence and abuse of authority towards brown people, that needs to be investigated.
You don't understand being black in America and being called a nigger. to shut up, and we're supposed to shut up. No, you're supposed to don't tell me not to say nothing. You're supposed to don't tell me not to say nothing. You're supposed to stand up. Stand with me. In strength. With hope and love. It'll never be.
But I don't know any other city employees that have the opportunity to kill people that they serve.
Are you ever fearful for your life?
Most of the time.
You are.
Hmm.
Do you ever think there's a possibility you may be assassinated?
Yep.
You do.
Hmm. I'm thinking about it constantly. I was arrested in August 2015, and that was the same year that Sandra Bland was killed. It was the same year that Natasha McCain, Tamir Rice was killed, Michael Brown, Eric Garner. First of all, I couldn't believe that they arrested me at that protest because for years I had been protesting. And they took me to a location that was not, they didn't enter me into a building. They had me in a parking lot sitting under the hot sun for what seemed like maybe 2 or 3 hours. And they didn't take me down until there was like a shift change, and there were other officers that came and picked me up, took me into another car, and then transported us downtown. And I mean, the whole time that they were trying to figure out what to do with us, in my mind, I was like, they've done something wrong, they're gonna get in trouble, I'm gonna die. Because they know that I do know your rights training, they know that I have access to lawyers.
And just for the record, you don't walk around with bodyguards. You don't have.
You came right in here, right? And you see me in here with kids, and we're in a community, so no, I don't. I don't walk around with bodyguards. And if you saw the video, no one was like making sure nobody came to get me. The police walked right over to get me, and no one was able to stop them, or no one was focused that much on my safety to stop.
Have you ever received death threats?
A lot, yeah.
All the time.
Mhm. I don't catch buses anymore because that was a big problem for me.
So you drive a car?
I don't drive a car. I get rides where I need to go. I take Uber, or I walk. But yeah, I don't.
Is there a specific reason why you don't drive a car, or?
I don't want to drive out here while black. I'm not doing anything to have an engaged situation with police. When my nephew died, I wasn't even protesting, but demanding questions about gang task force or about community safety put a target on me because to have those answers meant that someone had to show that they were doing work. I'm not fearful of dying because I don't want to lose my life. I want to get things done. There's work that I want to do, and I don't want anybody to detract me from doing it.
How do you seek to make change as mayor 2020? You personally.
Well, right now we have a city government that works as a proprietary partner with what we call stakeholders or appointed leaders. I really want to examine what those partnerships mean to us in reality for our outcomes. We have all these safety nets with all these political partners that are supposed to secure the support of community for different reasons, whether it's housing, whether it's food, whether it's our education, public safety, whatever. You have these partnerships that are supposed to help you maintain a relationship with the community. And what I've seen as an activist and as an advocate is that they don't represent the voices of the community. There is no direct engagement between the community. There's a lot of lacking of education for people that actually want to understand how to participate in social issues or policy or, any kind of participation on a government level. Our community is very diverse here in Portland, even though we know that we're known for its whiteness. The city is extremely diverse. And so when I talk about inclusiveness and when I talk about my priorities as a leader, it's for the entire diversity of the city. Because even right now, my two grandsons are interracial. Their mom is white, my son's black. And I know that they have to grow up.
What is your economic plan for the black community?
The city has coffers, the city has bureaus, the city has all these different partnerships that equate funding in so many different directions. And I think that one of the things about our black community is that even though we've been here since Oregon was established, we have nothing, we don't have a lot, and everything that we have is on the other end of someone else's arm. It's like, oh, let's make this for the black people, or let's make this for the brown people, or whatever.
So take me specifically through that plan?
One of the reasons that we have our legal clinic right now is because I wanted people to be able to focus on estate planning, saving their property, identifying what they can do for their futures, and utilizing what they have now. Because I think a lot of people have wealth that they've not identified because there's nobody doing evaluation. And growing up in Portland, I know that black art, black culture, our black lives. I want to publish the stories, the undocumented stories. I want to help families publish their photo albums and their proprietary knowledge of this state and this experience. And I want that knowledge and all of that exposure not only to be preserved and documented, but I want it to be an educational resource for people, and not just this generation, but for generations to come.
So how do you think Black Portland, particularly, can benefit from the wealth that's generated off of their talent?
I mean, they can start investing into their future. When we talk about property wealth and real estate, there's families out here that don't know that they still probably own property. There's people that don't know anything about probate. They don't know anything about the state probably having access to assets that they need. People don't like to say the word reparations, but we need to reparate whenever you've committed a crime against people, whenever you've created harm against people, whenever you've benefited from that harm and that violence, and it's become a financial benefit. There's going to come a time where that benefit has to go back to those people, where they're going to be entitled to the interest.
So how do you think your plan will plan out, so to speak?
I ain't telling you everything.
Okay.
My lawyer will probably get mad at me
Okay,
for talking
okay,
all
all right.
this.
Okay,
Like,
okay.
trust me, he's trying to indict the system and get people in courtrooms so they can sue.
Okay.
Like, literally, that
Okay.
is the plan, is to basically hold the system accountable so that people can, to receive what they need.
Okay.
You sue systems, you build up evidence, and then you take it into a courtroom, and then you establish a settlement, or you file a lawsuit.
If you were to receive $1 million grant to use for the city in any way, what would you do?
Legal support for people that need reparations. So that people that feel like maybe they have been harmed by, the gentrification, maybe they had been harmed by gang task force being identified as criminals, maybe they had been harmed by housing, like wherever. Because what I have learned is that a lot of the things that have happened to Black Americans, had we had legal support, a court would have determined that it was not okay. The fact that we don't even have the benefit to fight, it's always going to be okay to harm us.
What would you do to support Black businesses?
See, what are Black-owned businesses? How many do we still have? And I was talking about the publishing of our history, the storytelling, identifying our lost assets, building a relationship with probate and estate planning to where it becomes normal to, to hold down and to share our family inheritances and assets. All of that is going to create a proprietary value for our community.
And do you have the funding, the financing?
The funding is here. We're spending 52% of the city's budget on policing. And in my mind, if we're spending that much money to stage an opportunity to capture someone into a system, we could be spending a lot of that money on health and safety and housing.
And how do you think you'll be able to evoke that change?
So as the mayor, you get to work with the city engineers, you get to work with the city attorneys, you get to work with auditors. Money that we're saving could be reinvested in things that we actually need done right now, in regards to infrastructure for housing and participation in economics and entrepreneurship and businesses. We're just spending so much of it on policing people rather than enticing them to be educated or engaged, that we're missing the opportunity.
And do you think you can be that voice, or
Absolutely.
You will be that voice?
I will be that voice. That's the plan. I want to see economic change in our community. I want to house people that are coming out of foster care so that they don't become our next group of houseless people. I want to start engineering finance and opportunities through our education systems in the city, so that we can offset the intergenerational poverty that's happening because of the criminalization of people. I want to be very clear that I'm not running for mayor just to solicit the opportunities of the Black community. I want our vulnerable community members to no longer be listed as marginalized or at risk
So
or
this is for
vulnerable.
all people.
Yeah, I want to take those tags off. I'm tired of segregation.
Hi, I was just wondering if you were against capitalism or socialism.
I'm these isms. Ooh. Okay, so yeah, I'm anti-capitalism because I can't stand it. For my nephew, when he died, that it was a funding opportunity for the city. I watched after his death as agency after agency received funding because of the death, and then how those agencies had been receiving funding for 25 years for all of the death of all of the children and not having any priorities on stopping the violence. And it made me sick because it was like, wow, this is nonprofits are capitalizing off of dead children. But then watching agencies that say they stand up for social justice also capitalize and also benefit and not really have a firm commitment to community. The biggest thing that I can do right now is just be a community servant.
What's more important to you? Building new homes and commercial spaces, or better utilizing existing homes and storefronts?
Yeah, we just talked about that.
Yeah, I know.
Restoration, rehabilitation, restoration over demolition. I believe in it. I walked it to the state capitol to talk to state leaders a couple of years ago about my concerns of our community being gentrified and not having a really good survey of inhabitable properties and what it would take to do restoration. I think that some of the places, just in my own opinion, had been knocked down so fast. I'm like, hey, was there any kind of toxins that were, contributing to the building that might now be in our land and in our soil? And what are we doing as a city to make sure that as we demolish or restore, that we're doing it with a lens of health and environmental safety? Because growing up here, we knew people that had asbestos poisoning, and we knew that there was lead in the paint and things that that we in our communities where we live. So if that was the focus, environmental safety, then I could understand it.
I want you to look into this camera, and I want you to tell the people why they should vote for you to be mayor of 2020.
All right. My name is Teressa Raiford. I'm going to be your next mayor, Portland's next mayor, May 2020. Make sure that you register to vote now so that you can vote in those primaries. And I believe that you should elect me and that I will be the next mayor because this city is ready for social change. And I've been one of the key engineers with a lot of people standing beside me, connecting us with all the dots that we need so that we can engineer a new day. And it's time to get to work. So if you want social change in Portland, if you want systemic change in Portland, if you want inclusive politics and government, stand up for change, vote for Raiford. Let's make it happen.
Hi YouTube, it's Marcus Ward. I want to thank you for watching the Marcus Ward Show. Don't forget to subscribe and share.